I'm Megan Johnson, 34, and last year I bought my dream house for $600,000 after a decade of 60-hour work weeks. When my brother Travis lost his apartment, I offered him and his girlfriend Becky my spare rooms temporarily. 3 months later, I overheard him in my kitchen. "My sister's such a pathetic loser with no life." The words cut deep, especially after everything I'd sacrificed to help him. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Subscribe if you want to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being taken advantage of by the people closest to me. Growing up, Travis and I had a complicated relationship. He's 5 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, he seemed to have this natural charm that made everyone fall in love with him, while I was the responsible, studious child who followed rules and worried about the future. Travis lived in the moment. He could talk his way out of anything with his quick smile and those puppy dog eyes that even our strictest teachers couldn't resist. Our parents adored him. Don't get me wrong, they loved me too. But there was always this understanding that Travis needed more attention, more leeway, more chances. "He's just finding himself," my mom would say when he dropped out of community college for the third time. Boys develop differently, my dad would explain after Travis lost another job for simply not showing up. Meanwhile, I was plotting my future with color-coded planners since middle school. I knew I wanted financial security, something our family never really had. We weren't poor, but money was always a source of stress in our household. I remember the hushed arguments between my parents at the end of each month, the carefully calculated grocery shopping, the way my mother would sigh heavily when unexpected bills arrived. I promised myself I would never live that way as an adult. So while Travis was the life of every party, I was working part-time jobs through high school and college, building my resume and networking whenever possible. I majored in business with a focus on real estate, fascinated by the tangible nature of property as an investment. My career started at the bottom rung during the worst possible time, right before the housing market crashed in 2008. As a new assistant at Walker & Mitchell Realty, I watched experienced agents lose everything. Instead of scaring me away, it became my greatest learning opportunity. I paid attention to which properties held value even in the worst downturn, which neighborhoods rebounded first, and most importantly, how to build client relationships based on honesty rather than quick commissions. While others fled the industry, I doubled down. I worked weekends, took night classes in finance and property law, and volunteered to handle the problem clients no one else wanted. Slowly, I built a reputation as someone who would tell you the unvarnished truth about a property, even if it meant losing a sale. Clients started requesting me specifically, and by my 30th birthday, I was one of the top producing agents in Chicago. The cost of this success wasn't small. My college friendships faded as I missed more gatherings than I attended. Dating became a series of first meetings that rarely led to seconds because I was always glancing at my phone, waiting for client calls. My last serious boyfriend ended things after I missed his family's Christmas celebration to close an emergency sale for clients who needed to relocate quickly. "You're amazing at what you do, Megan," he said as he packed his things. "But there's no room for anyone else in your life." Those words stung because they contained truth. I had chosen my career over everything else. But last year, when I finally had enough saved for a substantial down payment, it all felt worth it. I found the perfect house in Lincoln Park, a gorgeous 4-bedroom Victorian with original hardwood floors, a backyard garden, and a front porch where I imagined finally having time to drink coffee and read on weekend mornings. The day I got the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room and cried. $600,000. An amount that had seemed impossible when I was a kid listening to my parents argue about electric bills. I had done it entirely on my own, without family money or a partner's income. This house represented every early morning, every missed birthday party, every sacrifice. For the first 2 months, I was blissfully happy arranging furniture, painting walls, and creating the home I'd always wanted. Then came the call from Travis. "Hey sis." His voice had that familiar tension that always preceded a request. So, things aren't great right now. He explained that he'd lost his job at the bar where he'd been working. Without income. He and Becky had been evicted from their apartment. They were staying with friends, but had worn out their welcome. It would just be for 2 weeks, he promised. Just until we get back on our feet. Becky has a job interview next week, and I'm talking to my old boss about getting my position back. I hesitated. Travis and I had a pattern. He would get into trouble, I would help him out, and somehow the help would never be quite enough. But he was my brother. And the thought of him homeless while I had a 4-bedroom house to myself made me feel guilty. 2 weeks, I agreed. The guest rooms on the second floor are furnished. You can use those. You're the best, Meg. His relief was palpable. We won't be any trouble, I promise. 2 days later. Travis and Becky arrived with 4 suitcases and an unreasonable number of plastic storage bins. Becky was pretty in a carefully manufactured way, platinum blonde hair, perfect makeup, and clothing that emphasized her figure. I'd only met her a handful of times at family gatherings, and she'd always seemed pleasant if somewhat disinterested in getting to know me. "Your house is so cute," she said as she walked in, her tone suggesting surprise. "It's much nicer than Travis described." I chose to take it as a compliment and showed them to their rooms. The second-floor guest room had a comfortable queen bed, an attached bathroom, and a small sitting area with a desk where either of them could work on job applications. "This is so perfect," Travis said, hugging me tightly. "I don't know what we would have done without you." That night, I ordered pizza, and the 3 of us ate together in the dining room. They shared funny stories about their friends, and I talked about some of my more interesting clients. It felt nice, having people in the house. Maybe, I thought, this arrangement would work out well for everyone. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first week was relatively smooth. Travis and Becky kept to themselves during the day while I was at work. They cleaned up after themselves reasonably well, though I noticed they seemed to eat enormous amounts of food. I didn't mind picking up extra groceries, after all. They were in a tough spot financially. By the second week, small irritations began to surface. I'd come home to find dishes piled in the sink, some with food hardened on them as if they'd been sitting there all day. The beautiful guest towels I'd bought specifically for the bathroom they were using were suddenly being used to mop up spills in the kitchen. "Hey, could you guys maybe wash dishes after you use them?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my tone light and casual. "It's just that I'm usually pretty tired when I get home from work." "Oh, sorry." Travis looked genuinely apologetic. "We've been so focused on job hunting that we sometimes forget. We'll be better about it." But they weren't better about it. Instead, new issues emerged. I'd find the living room television blaring at 3 in the morning. My carefully organized refrigerator became a chaotic mess of half-empty takeout containers. The utilities bill for the first month of their stay was nearly double my usual amount. By the time 2 weeks had passed, there was no mention of them leaving. Becky's job interview apparently hadn't panned out, and Travis's old boss had hired someone else. When I gently reminded Travis about our original agreement, his face immediately fell into an expression I recognized from childhood, the wounded look that always made me feel like I was being cruel. "I thought you understood our situation," he said quietly. "We literally have nowhere else to go. You have this huge house all to yourself. Is it really such a burden to help your only brother?" He reminded me of times in our childhood when I had supposedly abandoned him, like when I went away to college or when I missed his high school graduation because of an exam I couldn't reschedule. Each example was slightly twisted from how I remembered it, but the cumulative effect was a wave of guilt that washed away my resolve. "It's fine," I said finally. "You can stay a little longer. But I need you both to be more considerate about the house." Becky, who had been silently watching this exchange, suddenly became animated. "We're so grateful, Megan. And we were just saying the other day how amazing it is that you've accomplished all this on your own." She gestured around the kitchen. "I mean, most women your age are focused on building a family. But you've chosen a different path. It's so independent." The comment stung in ways I don't think she realized, or perhaps she did. Was she implying that I had this house instead of a family? That my success was some kind of consolation prize for being alone? I smiled tightly and changed the subject. As days stretched into weeks, the boundary violations grew more significant. One evening, I came home looking forward to enjoying a bottle of expensive Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion, a gift from a grateful client after I helped them find their dream home. The bottle was gone, and when I asked about it, Travis shrugged. We had some friends over last night and opened it. It was just sitting there for months. Didn't think you'd mind. I minded. I minded a lot. But confronting Travis had never been my strong suit. Since childhood, he'd been able to make me feel unreasonable for having perfectly normal boundaries. So instead of expressing my true feelings, I simply nodded and retreated to my bedroom, where I spent the evening reviewing listings instead of relaxing as I'd planned. The next morning, I found an empty wine bottle in the recycling bin, not my Cabernet, but a cheap brand I kept on hand for cooking. There was a note attached, replacement. Thanks. T&B. As if a $10 bottle of cooking wine was equivalent to the $100 Cabernet I'd been saving. This incident revealed the fundamental problem. Travis and Becky didn't respect me or my home. In their minds, my generosity wasn't something to be appreciated but expected. My belongings weren't to be treated with care but were available for their use and enjoyment. As their 2-week stay stretched into 2 months, I found myself becoming a stranger in my own home. I started staying later at the office, volunteering for weekend showings, and accepting dinner invitations from colleagues I normally would have declined. Anything to avoid going home to find another boundary crossed, another possession borrowed, another space taken over. My beautiful living room, which I decorated with such care, had essentially become Travis and Becky's domain. Their clothes draped over my furniture, their snack wrappers accumulated between couch cushions. And the television seemed perpetually tuned to reality shows with the volume too high. The internal conflict was exhausting. On one hand, I felt a deep resentment building. This was my house, purchased with my money, the result of my sacrifices. On the other hand, Travis was my brother, my family. Wasn't I supposed to help him when he needed it? Wasn't that what family did for each other? But as days passed, the scales of this conflict began to tip decisively toward resentment, especially when I realized that Travis wasn't actually looking for work with any real effort. His laptop was often open to gaming sites rather than job boards. When I asked about his progress, his answers were vague. I've put out some feelers. Or, I'm waiting to hear back about a few things. Meanwhile, the financial burden grew. Not only were my utilities doubled, but food disappeared from my pantry at an alarming rate. I found myself grocery shopping twice a week instead of my usual once. Small items around the house began to disappear. A pair of gold earrings I rarely wore, a silver picture frame from my office. Decorative items I wouldn't immediately notice were gone. I tried to convince myself I had misplaced these things, but a gnawing suspicion told me otherwise. The final straw in this phase of our deteriorating relationship came when my neighbor Harold, an elderly man who had warmly welcomed me to the neighborhood when I first moved in, knocked on my door one Saturday morning. "Megan, I don't want to be that neighbor," he began awkwardly, "but the noise from your house last night was really disruptive. My wife couldn't sleep. And you know she hasn't been well lately." I was confused. I had spent the night at the office preparing documents for a major closing, returning home just an hour earlier to shower and change. "What noise, Harold? I wasn't even home last night." His eyebrows rose. "Well, someone was. There were at least a dozen cars parked on the street, music playing until after 2 in the morning, and people in your backyard being very loud." My stomach sank. Without asking or even informing me, Travis and Becky had hosted a party in my absence. A party that had disturbed my neighbors and potentially damaged my standing in the community I was just beginning to be a part of. I apologized profusely to Harold, promising it wouldn't happen again. When I confronted Travis and Becky, who were still asleep despite it being nearly noon, their reaction was dismissive. "It was just a few friends." Travis yawned. "We kept it mostly under control." Under control. I was struggling to keep my voice even. The neighbors complained about noise at 2 in the morning. People were in my backyard without my permission. "You didn't even ask me if you could have people over." Becky rolled her eyes. We didn't think you'd be so uptight about it. It's not like you ever have people over anyway. The comment was designed to hurt, and it did. It referenced my lack of social life, my prioritization of work over relationships. But it also strengthened my resolve. This couldn't continue. Something needed to change. What began as irritating became increasingly unbearable as Travis and Becky seemed to view my initial tolerance as permission to push even further. The party that had prompted Harold's complaint wasn't an isolated incident, but the beginning of a pattern. I would return from work to find unfamiliar people lounging in my living room, using my things, eating my food. These are just some friends, Travis would explain casually, never bothering to introduce them. They'll be gone soon. But soon could mean midnight. Or 1 a.m. or not at all. Several times I came downstairs in the morning to find strangers asleep on my couch, leaving behind beer cans, cigarette butts on my back porch, and once a suspicious baggie that I'm certain contained drug residue. The physical toll on my house was becoming impossible to ignore. A red wine stain appeared on my cream-colored living room carpet. One of the dining chairs broke when someone apparently stood on it during a particularly rowdy evening. The beautiful vintage coffee table I'd found at an estate sale now bore water rings and cigarette burns. When I pointed these things out, Travis would promise to take care of it or insist that wear and tear happens in any house. As if my home were a college dormitory rather than a carefully curated space that represented my life's work. The situation began affecting my professional life as well. After a late night of noise kept me awake until 3 a.m., I overslept and missed a crucial meeting with first-time homebuyers. Another day, exhausted from the constant tension at home, I mixed up property details during a showing, embarrassing myself in front of clients and potentially costing myself a sale. Rachel, my boss, called me into her office after that incident. Is everything okay, Megan? She asked, genuine concern in her voice. This isn't like you. You're usually my most detail-oriented agent. I considered brushing it off with a vague excuse. But something about Rachel's maternal concern broke through my facade. My brother and his girlfriend are staying with me, I admitted. It was supposed to be temporary. But it's been over 2 months now, and it's challenging. Rachel nodded sympathetically. Family can be complicated. But remember, you've worked too hard to let anything jeopardize your career. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is to stop enabling behavior that keeps them stuck. Her words resonated with me. And I drove home that evening with a renewed determination to address the situation. I rehearsed what I would say, firm but kind, setting clear expectations and boundaries. I would give Travis and Becky a concrete deadline to find other arrangements. I would offer reasonable help in their job search if they were serious about it. But the current situation had to change. When I arrived home, I found Travis and Becky in the kitchen with 2 people I'd never seen before. Empty beer bottles covered the counter. And they were using my good kitchen knives to cut limes for tequila shots. Travis, I need to talk to you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing anger. Privately. He rolled his eyes dramatically for his audience. Sounds serious. The principal wants to see me in her office. His friends laughed and Becky smirked. Already. He was positioning me as the unreasonable authority figure, the killjoy. Nevertheless, he followed me to my home office, where I closed the door and turned to face him. This isn't working, I said directly. You and Becky need to find somewhere else to live. I've been patient, but my home is not a crash pad for you and your friends. Travis's demeanor changed instantly. The laid-back, joking brother disappeared, replaced by someone defensive and aggressive. Are you seriously kicking us out? He demanded. After everything we've been through as family? Where exactly do you expect us to go? I'm not kicking you out today, I clarified. But I need you to have a plan. It's been over 2 months, Travis. You promised 2 weeks. Oh. I'm so sorry my homelessness is inconveniencing you, he spat. Must be nice to be so perfect that you never need help from anyone. This isn't about helping, I countered. It's about respect. You don't respect my home or my things. You have parties without asking. You've damaged furniture. My neighbors are complaining. We're trying to have a life, he shouted. Unlike you, who does nothing but work. Maybe if you weren't such a control freak, you'd actually have friends to invite over instead of complaining about ours. Each word was precisely targeted to hit my insecurities. Was I too controlling? Had I sacrificed too much for my career? The doubt must have shown on my face because Travis immediately softened his approach, sensing weakness. Look, Meg, he said, his voice gentler. I know we've overstayed a bit, but Becky and I are really close to getting back on our feet. She's got another interview next week at a marketing firm, and I'm waiting to hear back about a bartending gig. Just give us a little more time. Before I could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Becky entered without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes red and her mascara artfully smudged to suggest she'd been crying. I couldn't help overhearing, she said quietly. Megan, I know we've been a burden, but we literally have nowhere else to go. My parents won't speak to me since I dropped out of college, and Travis's friends have all made it clear we can't stay with them. She wiped away a tear that seemed to appear on cue. If you make us leave now, we'll be sleeping in our car. Is that really what you want for your brother? The manipulation was obvious, yet effective. The thought of Travis sleeping in a car while I had empty bedrooms made me feel monstrous, regardless of how he had behaved. Once again, I found myself backing down. Fine, I said, feeling defeated. But things need to change. No more parties. Clean up after yourselves. And I need to see actual effort in finding jobs and another place to live. They both nodded eagerly, Travis hugging me and Becky squeezing my hand in gratitude. But as they left my office, I overheard Becky whisper, "Told you she'd cave." Travis's responding chuckle made my blood boil. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, recognizing how easily they had manipulated me yet again. I decided to test their sincerity by checking Travis's job search progress the next day. While they were out, I used my laptop to access our shared printer history. Travis had claimed to be printing resumes, but the log showed nothing job-related in weeks. Instead, he had printed concert tickets, a fantasy football roster, and instructions for filing unemployment benefits that he had never mentioned to me. I also discovered an unsettling truth while organizing mail. Becky had been redirecting some kind of assistance checks to my address. They weren't just failing to look for work. They were settling in for long-term dependency. The financial burden was becoming untenable. My utilities had tripled with the constant use of electronics, long showers, and heating or cooling running all day while I was at work. Food costs were astronomical as they seemed to view my pantry as an unlimited resource, often leaving half-eaten containers to spoil in the refrigerator. More troubling were the growing complaints from neighbors. Harold wasn't the only one affected by their behavior. Nancy from across the street mentioned her driveway being blocked multiple times by visitors' cars. The Thompsons next door reported cigarette butts thrown into their yard. My standing in the neighborhood I had worked so hard to join was being systematically destroyed. I began to feel physically ill from the stress. Sleep became elusive, replaced by grinding teeth and tension headaches. At work, I struggled to maintain my usual enthusiasm and attention to detail. Clients I had carefully cultivated relationships with began requesting other agents. My beautiful house, once my sanctuary and greatest achievement, had become a prison. I found myself volunteering for out-of-town real estate conferences just to escape for a few days. When home, I retreated to my bedroom, installing a deadbolt to protect the one space that still felt like mine. The pattern continued. I would gather courage to confront Travis. He would respond with a combination of guilt-tripping and vague promises. Becky would reinforce with tears or passive-aggressive comments, and I would back down, hating myself for my weakness, but seeing no clear way out without feeling like I was abandoning my brother. What I didn't realize was that rock bottom was still ahead of me, and it would come in the form of a devastating betrayal that would finally break the cycle for good. After 3 months of this deteriorating situation, I found myself physically and emotionally exhausted. A particularly difficult client had spent the entire day nitpicking every property I showed him, only to decide he wasn't ready to make a purchase. By 4 o'clock, a migraine was forming behind my right eye, pulsing with each heartbeat. Rachel took one look at my pale face and insisted I go home. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion," she said firmly. "Go home, take some medicine, and rest. The real estate market will still be here tomorrow." Under normal circumstances, going home early would have been a welcome respite. Now, it filled me with dread. But the migraine was worsening, making it difficult to focus on the road, let alone continue working. So I relented, driving slowly through afternoon traffic toward the house that no longer felt like home. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Travis's beat-up Honda and felt a sinking sensation. I had hoped they might be out, giving me a few hours of peace. Parking my car, I decided to enter through the side door that led directly to the kitchen, hoping to grab my migraine medication and retreat to my bedroom without interaction. As I approached the side of the house, I heard voices through the partially open kitchen window. Travis and Becky were inside, their tones animated and carefree. I was about to announce my presence when I heard my name. "Megan's such a pushover," Travis was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the window. "Did you see her face when you started with the fake tears? Priceless." Becky laughed. A harsh sound devoid of warmth. "I know. I should have gone into acting. But seriously, your sister is so easy to manipulate. All that tough businesswoman stuff is just an act." I froze, my hand on the door handle, unable to move as Travis continued. "My sister's such a pathetic loser. All she does is work. No boyfriend, no friends, nothing. But hey, at least we get this sweet place for free." Each word struck like a physical blow. I stood there, hand trembling on the door handle, as Becky responded. "And she's too much of a pushover to kick us out. I told you she'd believe that sob story about having nowhere to go. Meanwhile, my cousin said we could have stayed with her. But why would we when we've got this place? Right?" Travis agreed. $600,000 house, and she lets us live here for free. Who's the real loser in this situation? I felt nauseous, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. But what I heard next turned my shock to horror. "Did you pawn that silver picture frame yet?" Becky asked casually. "Yeah. Got $80 for it," Travis replied. "Not bad for something she probably doesn't even miss. I'm thinking about taking that jewelry box from her dresser next time she's working late. She's got some decent stuff in there that she never wears. Just make sure she doesn't notice too much missing at once," Becky cautioned. "We need this arrangement to last through winter at least. Rent-free living is too sweet to give up." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. They weren't just taking advantage of my hospitality. They were actively stealing from me and planning to continue indefinitely. My brother, my own flesh and blood, was methodically betraying me while mocking my generosity. I stumbled back from the door, nearly falling as dizziness overtook me. Somehow I made it back to my car, sliding into the driver's seat just as the tears came. Deep, body-shaking sobs that I muffled with my hand to prevent them from hearing. The physical pain was intense, my migraine now in full force, compounded by the emotional wound that felt like it might never heal. I sat there crying until I had no tears left, then drove to a nearby park where I parked facing the lake, trying to process what had just happened. My brother thought I was a pathetic loser. He was stealing from me, laughing at me behind my back, and planning to exploit my generosity indefinitely. Every kind gesture, every sacrifice I had made for him had not only gone unappreciated, but had been interpreted as weakness to be exploited. As the initial shock faded, something else began to take its place: anger. Not the fleeting irritation I had felt over dirty dishes or loud music, but a deep, righteous anger born of betrayal. I had worked my entire life to build something for myself, sacrificing relationships and personal time to create security and a beautiful home. And Travis, who had never put in the effort, who had drifted through life expecting others to fix his problems, was treating my greatest achievement as his entitlement. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that my enabling wasn't helping Travis, it was allowing him to remain stuck in a pattern of irresponsibility and exploitation. By constantly rescuing him, I was preventing him from facing the consequences that might actually force him to grow up. As the sun began to set over the lake, I made a decision. This would end, and it would end on my terms. I was done being manipulated, done feeling guilty for my success, done sacrificing my peace and home for someone who saw me only as a resource to be drained. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing steadied. The migraines still pounded, but the mental fog had cleared. I pulled out my phone and made a call to Jennifer, a close client who happened to be an attorney specializing in property law. "Jennifer," I said when she answered, my voice calmer than I expected. "I need some legal advice about removing unwanted occupants from my home. Can we meet tomorrow?" As I drove to a hotel for the night, unwilling to return to a house where I was neither respected nor wanted, I felt something unexpected: relief. The worst had happened. I had heard the unvarnished truth about how my brother saw me. And somehow, that truth had set me free from the obligation I had felt toward him my entire life. For the first time in months, despite the physical pain and emotional rawness, I slept deeply. No grinding teeth, no middle-of-the-night anxiety. Just the peaceful sleep of someone who has finally decided to stop carrying a burden that was never truly hers to bear. The following morning, I met Jennifer at her office downtown. Despite knowing her primarily as a client, she listened with professional attention and personal sympathy as I detailed the situation with Travis and Becky. "First, I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said when I finished. "Family situations are always the hardest. Now, let's talk about your legal options." She explained that despite not having a formal lease, Travis and Becky could be considered tenants under Illinois law due to the length of their stay. This meant I couldn't simply change the locks. I needed to follow proper eviction procedures. "The good news is that you have clear grounds for eviction," Jennifer continued. "Property damage, disturbing neighbors, unauthorized guests, and suspected theft all qualify. The challenging part is that formal evictions take time and court appearances, which could drag this out for months." "I can't wait months," I said, the thought of continuing to live under the same roof with Travis after what I'd heard making me physically ill. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "There's another approach. You can serve them with a 30-day notice to vacate. It's less confrontational than an eviction filing and gives them a clear deadline. If they refuse to leave after 30 days, then you have stronger grounds for an expedited eviction process." She helped me draft a formal notice that same day, explaining each section in clear terms. "Make sure you deliver this to them in person, with a witness if possible. Take a photo of the notice in their hands. Documentation is crucial." Armed with the notice and Jennifer's advice, I returned home. Travis and Becky were in the living room, watching TV and eating takeout they'd apparently charged to my credit card, judging by the receipt on the coffee table. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. Travis muted the TV with an exaggerated sigh. "I'm serving you with formal notice to vacate the premises within 30 days, I continued, handing the document to Travis. "This is not a request. It's a legal requirement." Travis glanced at the paper, then laughed. "Is this a joke? Some kind of official-looking scare tactic?" "It's a legally binding notice," I replied. "You have 30 days to find other accommodations. After that, I'll begin formal eviction proceedings if necessary." Becky snatched the paper from Travis's hands, scanning it with narrowing eyes. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights." "Yes, you do," I agreed. "You have the right to 30 days' notice, which I'm providing. You also had the responsibility to respect my home and property, which you've consistently failed to do." Travis stood up, his expression darkening. "What's gotten into you, Meg? This isn't like you." "Actually, it is like me," I said. "I've spent my life working hard and respecting others. I'm simply requiring the same from you now." Before the conversation could escalate further, I took a photo of them holding the notice, then turned and walked to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear them in the living room, Becky's voice rising in indignation, Travis alternating between angry outbursts and dismissive laughter. Later that evening, I found the notice torn into pieces on the kitchen counter. I carefully gathered the fragments, taped them back together, and took a photo as evidence of their response. Then I sent the photo to Jennifer, who advised me to continue documenting everything while preparing for the possibility that they wouldn't leave willingly. Over the next few weeks, I implemented the rest of my plan methodically. First, I installed security cameras in the common areas of the house, completely legal in my own property as long as they weren't in bathrooms or bedrooms. I didn't hide the cameras, in fact. I wanted Travis and Becky to know they were being recorded. Next, I went through the house documenting everything of value, taking photos and noting serial numbers where applicable. I moved my most precious belongings, family heirlooms, expensive jewelry, and important documents to a safe deposit box at my bank. I contacted my credit card companies and placed alerts on all my accounts, changed all my passwords, and made sure my mail was secured in a locked box that only I could access. I even installed a deadbolt on my home office where I kept financial documents. As the 30-day mark approached, it became increasingly clear that Travis and Becky had no intention of leaving. Their behavior oscillated between ignoring me completely and making pointed comments about family loyalty whenever we were in the same room. They made no visible efforts to pack or search for alternative housing. On day 29, I came home to find them hosting yet another gathering, this one smaller but still uninvited. As I walked through to my bedroom, Travis called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Don't mind my sister, guys. She thinks she's kicking us out tomorrow. But she doesn't have the guts to follow through. She's all talk." The laughter that followed cemented my resolve. That night, I made my final preparations, contacting a locksmith and arranging to take the following day off work. I texted Jennifer to let her know I was proceeding with the plan we had discussed, and she promised to be available by phone if needed. Day 30 dawned clear and cold, a perfect late autumn day. I waited until Travis and Becky left the house. They had a predictable pattern of leaving around 11 to meet friends for lunch, rarely returning before 3 or 4 in the afternoon. As soon as their car pulled away, I made 2 calls, first to the locksmith, who arrived within the hour, and then to a moving service I had on standby. The locksmith worked quickly, changing every external lock and reprogramming the security system with new codes. Meanwhile, the moving team helped me gather all of Travis and Becky's belongings. I was methodical about this process, making sure every item was handled carefully and nothing of theirs was left behind or damaged. Everything was placed on the front lawn, covered with tarps to protect from the elements. Their possessions weren't thrown haphazardly, but arranged neatly and respectfully. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my space while still treating their belongings with a dignity they hadn't shown to mine. By 2 o'clock, everything was in place. Their possessions were secured on the lawn. The locks were changed, and Jennifer was on speakerphone, reviewing the legal documentation I had prepared explaining their official removal from the premises and the retrieval process for their belongings. I sat on my front porch, a strange calm having settled over me. For the first time in months, the house behind me was quiet, clean, and mine again. The anxiety that had been my constant companion had lifted, replaced by a certainty that I was finally doing the right thing, not just for me, but ultimately for Travis as well. At 3:30, Travis's Honda screeched into the driveway. He and Becky sat frozen in the car for a moment, staring at the neat piles of their possessions on the lawn. Then they exploded from the vehicle, faces contorted with rage. "What the hell is this?" Travis shouted, storming toward me. "You actually did it? You threw our stuff out." I remained seated, keeping my voice level. "Your belongings are all there, undamaged and organized. As per the notice you received 30 days ago, your tenancy has ended. The locks have been changed, and the security codes have been updated." Becky pushed past Travis, her finger pointing accusingly. "You can't do this. It's illegal. We'll call the police." "Please do," I replied calmly, holding up my phone. "I have documentation of the 30-day notice, evidence of property damage and theft, and testimony from neighbors about disturbances. I also have an attorney on standby who can confirm that all legal requirements for your removal have been met." Travis's face flushed darker, and he took a threatening step toward me. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just throw your own brother out like trash?" "Step back, Travis," I said firmly. "The security cameras are recording, and threatening behavior will only make your situation worse." He glanced up at the camera visible above the porch and hesitated. Becky tugged at his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Whatever she said only seemed to enrage him further. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you can embarrass us like this? Wait until Mom and Dad hear about how you've treated family." "They already know," I replied. "I called them yesterday and explained the situation, including the theft and property damage. They're disappointed but understand my position." This wasn't entirely true. I had called our parents, but their response had been more mixed, with our mother particularly distressed about family conflict. Still, Travis didn't need to know the details. His bluff called. Travis changed tactics. "Fine. We'll leave. But I need to get something from inside first." "Anything left inside is documented and can be claimed through proper channels," I explained. "If there's something specific you need immediately, you can describe it to me, and I'll consider retrieving it." "This is ridiculous," he exploded. "It's my stuff. You can't keep me from it." "Actually, I can," I said. "And given your admitted theft of my belongings, I have reason to be cautious." The mention of theft made his eyes widen slightly. He didn't know I had overheard their conversation. Before he could respond, Becky pulled him aside for another whispered conference. This time when he turned back to me, his expression had changed from rage to calculation. "You know what? Keep the stuff. We don't need anything from a pathetic loser like you. But don't come crying to me when you realize how alone you really are." It was his parting shot, designed to wound me where he knew I was vulnerable. A month ago, it would have worked. Today, I simply smiled. "Well, who's the loser here?" I asked quietly. "The one with a home or the one with their stuff on the lawn?" Travis's face contorted, and for a moment I thought he might charge at me. Instead, he spun around and stalked back to his car, Becky hurrying after him. They began loading their most essential items into the back seat and trunk, working in furious silence. As they were completing this process, a police cruiser pulled up. Apparently one of my neighbors had called them after noticing the confrontation. Two officers approached cautiously, asking what was happening. I explained the situation calmly, showing them the documentation Jennifer had helped me prepare. Travis immediately launched into his version of events, portraying himself as the victim of a heartless sister. The officers listened to both sides, then examined my paperwork. After a brief radio consultation with someone at the station, the senior officer turned to Travis. "Sir, it appears the homeowner has followed proper procedure for terminating your tenancy. Your belongings have been made available to you. I suggest you collect them and find alternative accommodations." "This is my sister's house," Travis protested. "I'm family, not some random tenant." "Family or not, Illinois law is clear about property rights," the officer replied impassively. "You need to remove your belongings from the lawn and leave the premises peacefully, or we'll have to consider this a trespassing situation." The fight seemed to go out of Travis then, under the watchful eyes of the police. He and Becky continued loading what they could fit into their car. For larger items like furniture, I provided information about a storage facility nearby that offered reasonable monthly rates. "You have 48 hours to remove everything from the property," I explained. "After that, anything remaining will be considered abandoned." As Travis slammed the trunk of his overloaded car, he fixed me with one last venomous glare. "This isn't over, Megan. You'll regret this." I held his gaze steadily. "No, Travis. It is over. And the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." With the police still present, he had no choice but to get in his car and drive away, Becky shooting me a final hateful look from the passenger seat. As they pulled away from the curb, I felt no satisfaction or triumph, only a profound relief and the quiet certainty that I had finally done what was necessary. The police officers advised me to remain vigilant over the next few days in case Travis decided to return. They made a note in their system about the situation and suggested I call immediately if he showed up unannounced. As twilight descended over my neighborhood, I sat alone on my front porch, watching as the neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation returned to their homes, a few offering supportive nods or waves. Harold from next door actually came over with a casserole dish. "Thought you might not feel up to cooking tonight," he said kindly. "That couldn't have been easy, but for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." I thanked him with genuine gratitude, realizing that in my focus on Travis, I had overlooked the community around me, people who had been negatively affected by his presence, but who were now showing me quiet support. That night, I slept in my own home for the first time in weeks. The silence was profound. No blaring television, no drunken laughter, no anxiety about what I might find damaged in the morning. Just the peaceful quiet of a space that was mine again, where I could finally begin to heal. The 48 hours I had given Travis and Becky to remove their remaining belongings passed tensely. They returned several times, always with friends to help load larger items, always during daylight hours when neighbors were likely to be watching. Each time, I observed from inside. The security cameras recording every movement, but no further direct confrontation occurring. By the second evening, most of their possessions had been cleared from my lawn. What remained was largely junk, broken electronics, stained mattresses, garbage bags full of items they apparently didn't value enough to take. I arranged for a junk removal service to haul it away, documenting everything in case there were later claims about missing items. The first night alone in my fully reclaimed house was surreal. I walked through each room slowly, taking inventory of the damage: scratched hardwood floors, wine stains on the carpet, cigarette burns on windowsills, a cracked bathroom tile. Each mark represented a violation, but also a problem that could be fixed. Unlike the broken trust between my brother and me, these physical damages were reparable. I spent the weekend deep cleaning, opening windows to air out the lingering smell of stale beer and cigarettes, scrubbing surfaces and reclaiming spaces. The guest room that had been their bedroom required the most work. The mattress was stained beyond salvation, and the walls needed repainting. But the physical labor was therapeutic, each clean surface representing another step toward restoration. On Monday morning, I returned to work with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. Rachel noticed immediately. "You look 10 years younger," she commented. "I take it the situation with your brother resolved itself." "Not by itself," I replied with a small smile. "I resolved it." I threw myself back into work with renewed energy, reconnecting with clients who had drifted away during my distracted months. Many were understanding when I obliquely referenced family issues that had since been resolved. My focus returned, and with it, my success. I closed 3 major sales in the first 2 weeks after Travis's departure, making up for the commissions I had lost during the worst of the ordeal. I thought the worst was behind me until Thursday evening, when my doorbell rang around 8 p.m. Looking through the peephole, I was startled to see my parents standing on the porch, their expressions grave. I opened the door with trepidation. "Mom, Dad, this is unexpected. We need to talk about Travis," my mother said without preamble. "What you did was completely uncalled for." I invited them in, maintaining my composure as they settled on the couch where Travis and Becky had spent so many hours lounging. My father looked uncomfortable, my mother visibly upset. "Travis is your brother," she continued. "Family takes care of family. I raised you better than to throw your own flesh and blood out on the street." "Did Travis tell you why I asked him to leave?" I asked calmly. "He said you got tired of helping him and just decided one day that you were done being a sister," my mother replied accusingly. I took a deep breath. That's not what happened. Travis and Becky were stealing from me. They damaged my property. They had parties without permission that disturbed my neighbors. And I overheard them mocking me, calling me a pathetic loser while planning to exploit my generosity indefinitely. My father's expression shifted slightly, but my mother remained unmoved. "He's going through a rough patch. You're more established. It's your responsibility to help him until he gets on his feet." "I did help him," I replied. "For over 3 months, well beyond the 2 weeks originally agreed upon. But at some point, help becomes enabling." Travis wasn't looking for jobs. He was settling in for permanent dependency. My mother shook her head dismissively. "You've always been hard on him. Not everyone can be as driven as you." The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, my mother defending Travis unconditionally, my father occasionally attempting to mediate but largely remaining silent. Finally, when it became clear that no productive resolution was forthcoming, I made a decision. I love you both, I said firmly. And I will always be your daughter. But I am an adult who has worked hard for everything I have. I deserve respect in my own home, including from family. If you can't see that, then perhaps we should take some time apart until you can. My mother's eyes widened in shock. Are you choosing a house over your family? I'm choosing self-respect, I corrected her. Something I should have done much sooner. After they left, I sat in my quiet living room, processing the conversation. For the first time, I had stood my ground with my parents about Travis. It felt simultaneously terrible and liberating. The following weeks brought a series of escalating texts and voicemails from Travis. Initially, they were angry and threatening. Promises of legal action, which never materialized, vague warnings about making me sorry, accusations of being a heartless bitch. I documented each one without responding, forwarding the more concerning ones to Jennifer for her records. Gradually, as his anger yielded no results, the messages changed tone. There were awkward attempts at reconciliation. I miss you, sis, and can't we just talk about this? Then came the guilt trips. Mom is really upset about this, and family shouldn't treat each other this way. Through it all, I maintained my silence. Not out of cruelty, but because I recognized the pattern. Any response would be interpreted as an opening, a crack in my resolve that could be exploited to pull me back into the dysfunctional dynamic we had established over a lifetime. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I repaired and redecorated the damaged areas of my home. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during Travis's stay, accepting dinner invitations and even hosting a small gathering of colleagues to celebrate a record sales month. Harold and his wife became regular dinner companions, their maturity and stability a welcome change from the chaos that had dominated my home life. Other neighbors, relieved that the disruptions had ended, began to include me in community events. For the first time since moving in, I felt truly part of the neighborhood. 6 weeks after the eviction, the messages from Travis stopped abruptly. I learned through my father that he and Becky had moved to Indianapolis, where Travis had found work at a restaurant owned by one of Becky's relatives. Whether this job would last longer than his previous ones remained to be seen, but at least he was physically distant enough that I could truly begin to heal. The true victory came not when Travis left, but about 3 months later. I was hosting a dinner party for colleagues and clients when my phone buzzed with a text. Glancing down, I saw it was from Travis, the first contact in weeks. Hey Meg, I've been doing some thinking. I was wrong about a lot of things. What I said about you is messed up. You're not a loser. I was the loser. Still figuring stuff out, but wanted you to know that. I stared at the message for a long moment, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. There was no request for money. No hint at wanting to move back, no obvious manipulation. Just a simple acknowledgement that had been a long time coming. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I slipped my phone back into my pocket and rejoined my guests. As I looked around at the lively conversation, the easy laughter, the new connections being formed in a home that was once again my sanctuary, I realized that the true victory wasn't in the confrontation on my front lawn or even in Travis's belated acknowledgement of his behavior. The victory was in reclaiming my sense of self-worth, in recognizing that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but necessary, in understanding that sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do for someone we love is to stop shielding them from the consequences of their actions. Later that night, after my guests had departed and I sat enjoying the peaceful aftermath of a successful evening, I finally replied to Travis's text. Thank you for saying that. I hope you're doing well in Indianapolis. Simple, acknowledging his apology without opening the door to the old patterns. It was all I could offer right now. And for the first time in our relationship, I felt no guilt about maintaining that boundary. The house around me, once a battlefield, had become a home again. Not just a structure I had purchased, but a true reflection of who I was and what I valued. The $600,000 I had spent wasn't just an investment in property. It was an investment in myself and my right to define the terms of my own life. I had finally learned what my brother never had, that true success isn't measured in dollars or possessions. but in the courage to stand up for your own worth, even when those closest to you fail to see it. The months following Travis's departure were a time of profound healing and self-discovery. While the physical damage to my home was relatively easy to repair, new paint, professional carpet cleaning, replaced furniture, the emotional wounds took longer to mend. At first, I experienced unexpected waves of guilt and doubt. Had I been too harsh? Should I have given Travis one more chance? The ingrained patterns of a lifetime don't disappear overnight. And I found myself slipping into old thought patterns, questioning my right to prioritize my own well-being. These moments of doubt gradually diminished as I witnessed the positive changes in my life. My career flourished now that I could focus fully on my clients without the constant drain of home stress. I closed the year with my highest sales figures ever, earning a prestigious award from my brokerage that came with a bonus substantial enough to cover most of the repairs to my home. More meaningful than professional success was the support I received from unexpected sources. Harold and his wife Marie invited me for Sunday dinners, treating me with a grandparental affection I hadn't experienced since childhood. My neighbor Nancy, a retired therapist, gently suggested I might benefit from professional counseling to process the family dynamics that had led to the situation with Travis. Taking her advice proved transformative. Through weekly sessions with Dr. Garcia, I began to understand the roots of my enabling behavior. How being the responsible one had become so deeply intertwined with my identity that setting boundaries felt like a betrayal of who I was supposed to be. How my parents had inadvertently trained me to feel responsible for Travis's well-being from an early age, creating a codependency that had persisted into adulthood. Responsibility without boundaries isn't responsibility at all, Dr. Garcia told me during one particularly insightful session. It's martyrdom. And martyrs may be admired, but they're not actually helping anyone in the long run. This perspective helped me navigate the complicated terrain of family relationships in the aftermath. My mother remained cool toward me for several months, occasionally making passive-aggressive comments about real family values during our infrequent phone calls. My father, however, surprised me with a lunch invitation about 4 months after the incident. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he admitted as we settled into a booth at his favorite diner. "But I wanted to tell you something." He looked uncomfortable but determined. "I should have stepped in sooner with Travis. All these years, your mother and I have been, well, we've been unfair to you, expecting you to be the adult while letting him stay a child." The admission brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Dad." "I was wrong," he continued. "About the house situation, too. Travis told us some things that didn't add up, and well, I found out about the stealing. That crossed a line." He reached across the table to awkwardly pat my hand. "You did the right thing, Megan. It couldn't have been easy, but you did right." This reconciliation with my father was an unexpected gift, a first step toward a healthier family dynamic. My mother took longer to come around, but by the following Thanksgiving, she had softened enough to invite me to dinner without tension dominating the occasion. As for Travis, our relationship entered a new phase characterized by careful distance and cautious communication. After his initial apologetic text, we exchanged occasional messages, surface-level updates about work, or brief holiday greetings. He never asked to visit, and I never invited him. It was a fragile peace, but it was more honest than the destructive closeness we had maintained before. Through Dr. Garcia's guidance, I came to accept that while Travis would always be my brother, our relationship might never be what I had once hoped for. Some bridges, once burned, can only be rebuilt as footpaths rather than highways. I learned to find peace in the limited connection we maintained, recognizing that it was healthier for both of us than our previous pattern. The most surprising development in my healing journey was the way my social circle expanded. Without the constant drain of Travis and Becky's presence, I found energy to accept invitations I would have previously declined. A client's housewarming party led to friendship with Jennifer outside our professional relationship. A neighborhood book club introduced me to women my age with similar interests. Rachel from work began inviting me to industry events that often extended into enjoyable dinners where we discussed more than just real estate. 6 months after Travis left. I hosted my first major gathering, a holiday party for neighbors, colleagues, and new friends. Standing in my beautifully decorated living room, watching people connect and laugh in a space that was wholly mine, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond property ownership. I had created not just a house but a home. And not just a home but a community. As guests mingled, Harold raised his glass in an impromptu toast to Megan, who teaches us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. The warm response from the gathered guests brought a flush to my cheeks and an unexpected lump to my throat. These people saw me, really saw me, not as a meal ticket or a convenience or a pushover, but as someone worthy of respect. It was a revelation that continued to unfold in the months that followed. My 35th birthday arrived in the spring, and for the first time in years, I took the day off work to celebrate. No major party or elaborate plans, just a day dedicated to things that brought me joy. I spent the morning gardening in my backyard, planting flowers that would bloom throughout the summer. I had lunch with Jennifer at a new restaurant we'd been wanting to try. In the evening, I walked to the local bookstore and treated myself to novels I'd been too busy to read. It was a simple day, but it represented something profound. I was learning to value my own happiness, to carve out space for joy without guilt or justification. The house that had once been a battlefield had become a sanctuary, not just from external demands, but from my own punishing standards of self-sacrifice. The final piece of my healing journey came unexpectedly, nearly a year after the confrontation on my front lawn. I received an email from Travis with the subject line 1 year later. Meg. It began. It's been a year since everything went down, and I've been doing a lot of thinking. The restaurant job is going well. Got promoted to assistant manager last month. Becky and I split up in February. Turns out she was using me as much as we were using you. I'm not writing to ask for anything or to make excuses. Just wanted to say I understand better now why you did what you did. It was the wake-up call I needed. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I treated you and your home. You deserved better from your brother. Maybe someday we can try again with boundaries and mutual respect. Until then, I hope you're doing well and that the house is everything you dreamed it would be. I read the email several times, feeling the last hard knot of pain in my chest finally begin to loosen. There was no miraculous transformation here, no Hollywood ending where all was instantly forgiven. Just a small step toward possible reconciliation. An acknowledgement that might eventually lead to something healthier. My response was measured but genuine. Thank you for this, Travis. Congratulations on the promotion. That's a real achievement. I'm proud of the work you're doing on yourself. I think we both needed to find our own paths. When you're ready for a visit with clear boundaries, let me know. Take care of yourself. That night, sitting on my front porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint my neighborhood in golden light, I reflected on everything that had transpired over the past year. The pain had been real. The confrontation necessary, the aftermath challenging. But through it all, I had discovered something essential, that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but sacred. That drawing boundaries wasn't about shutting people out but about defining what kind of relationships I would accept in my life. The $600,000 house had become so much more than a real estate investment. It had become the setting for my most important life lesson. That true generosity comes from a place of strength, not weakness. That helping others requires healthy boundaries to be sustainable. That sometimes the hardest and most loving thing we can do, for ourselves and others, is to say no more. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again confuse self-sacrifice with love or enablement with support. I would build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. And I would never apologize for requiring that respect, even from family. The journey hadn't been easy, but sitting there in the peaceful evening, in a home that was truly mine in every sense of the word, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about boundaries with family members? It's one of the hardest things we face in life, and I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. If my story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength through difficult situations. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put yourself first when others won't. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself when it matters most.